I'm Gabriel Rader, reporting for WHYY Summer Journalists. Voter apathy is the phenomenon where people choose not to vote due to the belief that their vote doesn't matter. However, for the high-stakes midterms in November, and with guns, abortions, and voting rights on the ballot, many could argue that their votes matter more now than ever.
The real swing in Pennsylvania is turnout in Philadelphia.
I wouldn't say that they are necessarily voting in equities as much as I would say the bigger concern of voter apathy.
Voter apathy tends to increase when there are barriers to voting, such as voting ID requirements, lack of childcare, or long lines at polling places that make people believe that voting is too much trouble for what it's worth.
People would be waiting for hours just to vote. I don't think that's fair, especially for something that would, a certain area that would vote a particular way should be silenced or anything. I feel like it should be accessible to everyone. It should be quick for everyone. People shouldn't have to take off work or feel like they're compromising their jobs or, their day just to make sure that everyone's getting rights.
Pennsylvania organization PA Stands Up helps people overcome those hurdles by reducing systemic barriers to voting and helping people navigate laws.
Parts of Pennsylvania, we would offer transportation and get handicap accessible vans and volunteers who offer pickups and drop-offs and things like that to the polls. We do election work, and sometimes we do democracy defense work. So democracy defense is the nonpartisan. We categorize that as making sure that everybody's up to date on the new, requirements for voting, vote by mail.
Other organizations, like Power Interfaith, are involved with civic engagement and motivating voters to turn out on Election Day.
So in order to get the kind of wins that we want, that means that you have to have an engaged population. People have to be registered, people have to actually vote, and then they have to turn out on Election Day as well. We organized rides where we had over 100 motorcyclists riding through some of the neighborhoods with what we call low propensity voters, where it's kind of the hardest voter to get to.
Laws that make voting harder have the potential to increase voter apathy.
Ironically, the same legislators that voted to put in mail-in voting, no excuse mail-in voting, when it didn't work out for their particular party, now they want to eliminate mail-in voting, citing voter fraud, but they can't prove any voter fraud. But mail-in voting has been extremely, important, especially during the pandemic. And now people have understood that, this is actually easier than trying to go out to a polling place.
Recently, Republicans in the Pennsylvania state legislature are trying to pass amendments to the state constitution that can't be vetoed by the governor. Democratic leaders are worried they will pass laws that make it harder for Pennsylvanians to vote.
If they get a trifecta, if Mastriano wins the governor's office, and depending on what happens to Republican balance in the state in the state House and Senate, I would expect them to try to pass legislation that would restrict voting and targeted at Democratic counties, and that would be things like voter ID, purging the voting rolls.
Despite potential challenges to voting rights, organizations are confident that if voters stay motivated to overcome those barriers, their votes will count.
Convince them that their vote matters, because the barriers become too much when folks believe that their vote doesn't matter, their vote doesn't influence election. But at the end of the day, it does.
Voting is extremely important to maintain American democracy, and it is difficult to accurately represent the views of a country when people don't think they will be heard. When voting is made harder, people are even more discouraged from voting. However, local organizations are working to decrease voter apathy by alleviating barriers and motivating people to overcome barriers on their own. I'm Gabriel Rader, reporting for WHYY Summer Journalists.